Welcome to part 2 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on May 7th in the beautiful Memorial Arena in Victoria. I'd just like to thank our volunteer crew for making this possible and the Shaw staff. In this segment, we're going to be talking to Bill McKechnie, and we're going to be talking about co-housing. And Bill just told me it's a new wave, it's happening. But maybe, Bill, you can start by telling us, what is co-housing?
What is co-housing? Well, you're not the first ones to ask me that. In fact, most people ask that question. I come up with an example, and I think, well, you know, you get a bunch of students at the university, and they all rent rooms in this house together, and they share a kitchen and they share a dining room, but they have their own private bedroom. Well, that's co-housing. Pretty fundamental level, but that's it. But what's happening now, and maybe you've experienced this too, is quite often I hear people that get together for dinner, you know, couples that know each other, and they say, well, let's buy a big old house and live together and share expenses and go on like that. And that's I can't tell you how many people have said, you know, that this is what they want and desire, but unfortunately not many of them get around to doing this. So co-housing, though, as a principle, started with a number of people sharing their resources, sharing their space. It started in Denmark in the 60s when a lot of families with young children got together and started to create these little communities around a courtyard. And you know, they brought up their kids in it, and like every community needs, or every child needs, you know, a community to raise it. Well, these kids were very fortunate. They played together. They had 3 mothers, and you know, the parents interacted and stood in for each other. Anyway, that concept they found worked very well with a cross-spectrum group of ages, and seniors co-housing is coming along now. This is the next wave. This has come from Europe now, and it's gone to started in the eastern United States. It was brought over here in the mid-90s and is just starting to go like wildfire now.
So let's say you could have, let's say, just a group of 12 houses built kind of in a square,
yes,
around a central courtyard, and that would be a model that could sort of work?
That would be one model. There's huge models, different models. There's the urban model, there's the suburban model, there's the rural model. You even have co-housing places with chickens and pigs and all that type of thing too. So yes, there's different models.
Where is it most popular? And how big is it in those places?
Popularity is not a word you could use, because once these things fill up, they fill up, and people tend to stay there. So it's hard to measure that popularity. Sorry, I missed the other question there.
I can't remember it either.
Okay, well, let's go on.
Yeah, let's go on. How is it different from people living in condos or townhouses today?
Well, it's similar. I mean, the urban co-housing, the more dense co-housing like we are, it is a strata title unit. People own the unit. They have common space. They have shared space and so on, like a lot of condominiums do. But we emphasize the shared space, and we emphasize eating together on occasion. We emphasize celebrating together. We emphasize bringing in people, lecturers. We have common area, 1,800 square feet of common area in the main building that's designed for multi-purpose use. You can have yoga in there. You can have, you know, small dance classes, whatever you want. But that's what the community wants, and that's what they want to do together.
So it could be like a condo unit or a condo building or a townhouse complex, but there's more emphasis on bringing people together.
There's the development of a community of people. If you could think of it as a really good neighborhood, you know, you don't have to be friends with everybody else, but you know, you support each other. You know, if you go away for the weekend, somebody will take in your newspaper or feed your cat or something like that. But at the same time, we do get together on a voluntary basis to do the kind of things we want. Those things are the things I just mentioned to you. There's a heavy emphasis on the Fernwood Urban Village and gardening and organic culture. So, you know, we're preparing our own food. That's the type of way we are going.
So you are part of a co-housing group called the Fernwood Urban Village. Can you just describe what that is, what the plan is for that? How many units and...
Well, we have about 20 members now, and we have about 31 units. And
31 units planned.
31 units planned. And providing and we could talk about this too, providing the City of Victoria rezones the property for our development permit, which should happen in June sometime.
So you think that is going to happen?
I believe it.
Okay.
If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't be here. It's just too good an idea to turn down.
You know, it's funny because it's an idea that even though I live very close to the beautiful thing that you've got planned, and I walk by it all the time.
Right.
This sort of small garden and some a few buildings that are, I guess, going to be changed for
That's right.
I don't know anything about this idea of co-housing. It seems to be a new wave that nobody here knows about, but it sounds like a good wave because I think that's what people want, is people want to be able to work together with their neighbors and to have a sort of set of rules that everybody can live by and just make everybody's life a little bit easier, a little bit better.
That's right. Well, we're appealing to people with kids, and we're appealing to largely to people that are looking to get out of their 3 or 5 bedroom house now. Their kids have gone. They want to downsize their life a bit. They want to simplify things. A lot of them don't want cars. I mean, there's only a few of us that actually look at the idea of actually maintaining a car, and that's because we can walk downtown in 20 minutes. We have bike share, we have ride share, and we also own a car share. So, with those things in place, you don't really need the expense of maintaining that kind of thing.
Can I mention what might be a small problem and see how the co-housing would deal with it? Is that possible?
Go for it.
Okay. I was talking about basketball a short while ago with somebody who likes to play basketball. And he said, yeah, let's set up a basketball hoop in the courtyard.
Yeah.
And I said, well, no, I don't want to listen to somebody playing basketball, right? And I don't. So how, because, those are the issues that come up in neighborhoods. And in our neighborhoods, we really have no real way of dealing with them. How would a co-housing unit deal with
Well, that's actually one of the strengths of co-housing. Say there's a problem. Say that somebody is out there playing basketball at midnight.
Well, say even at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. It goes to basically the membership council, which consists of everyone in the village, and everyone expresses their views on it. And it's amazing, what happens after that, because it's sort of like a democratic process. The people who want to play basketball at 4 o'clock in the afternoon all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, we're keeping so-and-so's awake from their nap this afternoon, or that one, whatever. And they move to the park across the street.
Or maybe a time is worked out when it works for everybody.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I mean,
exactly.
That really sounds like, it sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good.
Well, another little example is up until a few months ago, I lived in an 80-unit apartment building. It had a beautiful view and so on and so forth. It had, 150 people in it. And I think after 3 years, I knew the names of 3 people in that building. And so that's what moved me to drive this project on its way. And I'm really happy that I did. I'm getting a great response. Or we are getting a great response, because it's really the community now. They've taken over.
So what's happening?
What's happening? We're waiting for our rezoning. It's been almost 2 years before the city. It's been hugely slow. The bureaucrats and technicians, the ones who maintain and make sure that the bylaws are acceptable, have had a tough time with this one, because we've come in, we've increased the density because of all the shared space we have. We've reduced our setbacks to create the courtyard. We've gone over the height that was prescribed in 1992 in the neighborhood. We're doing a lot of things that they just didn't know how to deal with us, and so we've had to work a lot of things out together, and I think we've been successful in doing that. So Council members that I've talked to seem to be in favor of it because it follows a lot of the principles of the official community plan, which was just passed last year. And so basically our technical specs and our bylaws haven't really kept up with the official community plan yet. So the time it's taken has been that, working that out.
So this is maybe a little bit groundbreaking in that if you can get the zoning approval, then so can others who want to do something similar.
I suppose this will act as a model, and a lot of people will be looking at it.
What kind of response do you get from the general public or people who know about it?
We get a lot of interest. That's for sure. As I said, we're appealing to a group of people with children, or people that are adults that want this sense of community. I think I was born in a family that was a nuclear family, and I think a lot of my cohorts were raised in nuclear families. What we want, we're saying nonsense. We want community now. That's the way it's been for a long time in the history of the world, and it's about time we maybe return to a shade of that.
So then it sounds like building community is one of the basic concepts of co-housing.
It is, absolutely. If you don't have that community, they tend to fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds good to me. I really hope that it's successful. How can people join? Well,
first thing you do is you go onto our website. That's the easiest thing to do. And the website not only explains us, but it has what we call the steps to membership, and that involves putting in an application. Part of the process is getting to know everybody that comes in, so they have to attend certain functions, meetings, social events, whatever, but it gives us a chance to get an idea of who they are, but it also gives us a chance to realize that they're not coming in with expectations that we can't meet, and that's really important to us. So that's the process.
How about if somebody comes in and rockets up the music at 9 o'clock at night and says, I don't really want to be part of this co-housing anymore, I'm just going to do what I want, and too bad. Is there a way to deal with that kind of a situation?
It's exactly the same as the basketball thing. It goes to the community.
Okay.
And the community, there's power in that, huge power, and it's just one of those things that the guy that wants to crank the music up will probably stop.
And if he doesn't,
he doesn't, he may, I don't know. Hey, we're just starting this thing, so ask me again in another couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to go through the issues.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what kind of units you're building and what the cost would be, do you think?
Well, we have, because we're on Grant Street, which is one of the greenways, the walking, cycling greenways to downtown, we have some smaller buildings on Grant Street. We have a duplex and a triplex. And we're also fixing up what we call the teacherage, which was actually a co-housing place for the single female teachers at Vic High before the First World War. And so each of these teachers had their own bedroom, and they shared a living room, they shared a kitchen space, and they worked at the school. So anyway, we didn't find that out till later, but we're fixing that building up. It's a building it's basically a Edwardian type building, Tudor, stucco, very straight and very plain. And we're going to keep that more or less in the style, although we will make it very energy efficient.
So are you going to have like bachelor units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom?
Oh, the units, they go from roughly 350 feet with a loft. They go to about 1,100 square feet, with the majority of them being in the 600 to 800 foot range. It's and the cost of the prices, we haven't nailed those down yet because we're still working on our building costs, but we're aiming for a target of somewhere around 185 to say 465. That's the range we'll be in, and some of those suites will be worth it.
Is there any cost saving to having somebody, just a developer, come in and do something? Can people who look at co-housing think this is going to save me a little bit of money as well as everything else?
Well, in actual fact, co-housing is a little more expensive than your average strata title, and that's because you're building elaborate facilities for common use.
Okay.
And that has to be added on to all the units.
Right.
But it works out. It works out.
Yeah. Okay. So people join by contacting the website. Are there any co-housing units in BC right now? Not co-housing
There's
units.
15 that are established or in process like ours. There's 15 now. There's one in Courtenay, there's one in Nanaimo, they're all over the place. They're in Burnaby, they're in up the valley, Roberts Creek, and but they're coming on strong. None of these were around, 15 years ago.
How big would one be? 20 units, 30 units, 40 units?
Well, the best ratio for co-housing is somewhere between 20 and 40 units. And the reason for that is that if you have a co-housing units that are over 40, sometimes you get factions that develop and trouble develops. And if you have under 20, there's not enough strategic mass to get that community rolling. There has to be a bit of effort put into creating a community, and then it lasts. So we're at 31 units, and we're sort of in that sweet spot of ones that will really work. We're also an urban co-housing rather than a rural or suburban, and the urban ones, in my observation, have been the best and most functional co-housing complexes.
Well, I've learned something today about co-housing. It sounds to me like something I'd be interested in. It sounds to me like something I'd like to see being built, a lot, because we need community, and if this can help move us in that direction, I think it can only be good. We've been talking to Bill McKechnie, and Bill, do you have any final words?
Final words.
Final words.
Now we're waiting till June, and once the rezoning is settled, and we are very optimistic that it'll go in our favor, then it's getting out the hammers and nails. Oh,
so you're ready to start building?
Well, we have to do the working drawings first.
The financing is there?
Financing is sniffing around us, and they like us, and they're waiting for our rezoning.
Good. Thank you very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum, and thank you, Bill McKechnie. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, May 7th. This is our last show before the election. Our guest in this segment is Chris Cook. Chris is the host of Guerrilla Radio on CFUV Radio, and he also has a great website called PacificFreePress.com, which covers, I think, mainly international and Middle Eastern issues. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure, Jack. Well, thanks for having me back, incidentally. It's so much fun to be here. And yeah, PacificFreePress.com, we've been going for about 7 years. We've been actually a little slow lately. We got taken down. We've been attacked over the years, and the last one was brutal, and it really knocked the stuffing out of us. So I do also post at the Guerrilla Radio blog.blogspot.ca site, and a little bit more active there. But I try to do international, national, and local news. I spread it out. My bias is for the big, sexy stories. I'm really interested in world politics and what's going on in the broader world. But I try to bring it down. It's Pacific Free Press too, so I try to get a lot of Pacific-oriented stories up there as well. Because the main bias of, if you watch the news, is really it's an Atlantic, a northern hemisphere, an Atlantic bias, which is Europe, America, and these kinds of issues. And Asia sometimes gets left off the agenda. So I try to fill in the blanks in my own small way.
Okay. We're going to start off by talking about the upcoming BC elections.
Yeah, Jack, we're a week away right today. It's exactly 1 week before the big day here in BC. And I was listening to you and Walt earlier, and I got to disagree. I can't go along with the idea of not participating. I mean, I can understand the sentiment for sure, and I've heard it everywhere. But instead, I've decided on a Declaration of Independence. And that is not like the American Declaration of Independence, but the Declaration of Independence. And that is to vote for independence and get out of this this party system, which has done so much damage to the concept of democracy, really. We're trapped in British Columbia and in Canada and everywhere you look in Western liberal democracies, they seem to be stuck in this pillar-to-post paradigm where the interests of the people are never served. The people behind the scenes are often the very same people. If you look at BC, a lot of our politicians, they change their stripes. They go effortlessly from party to party because there isn't really a choice in our process right now. It's all become a matter of self-serving power and seeking money and influence.
Well, I would have to agree with a lot of that, and I think that's a good idea, to vote for independents instead of vote for the parties. I'd also suggest another good thing would be, we need somebody like an auditor general to oversee the political parties and make sure they operate fairly and honestly and democratically.
Well, we have that, though. We've got Elections BC and Elections Canada. That's what they were set up to do. Now, whether or not they do it, you know, that's another thing.
I don't think they do it or are even supposed to do it. I think the parties are largely self-regulating, much like the unions, and that is a recipe for big, big problems.
Well, how they run their own show, maybe,
Yeah.
but when it comes to elections, you
Yes,
know,
elections
these
are
guys are
watched.
supposed to be, you know, watching out and making sure everything is done on the up and up. We saw, you know, with the federal elections, how that wasn't the case, and we see now that Elections Canada isn't really fulfilling its mandate. It's being cut now as well by the federal government. I mean, if that doesn't send a message to a career a bureaucrat, you know, like, oh, well, maybe I'm not going to, you know, press this issue, you know, with the robocalls and everything else. But I would say about the BC elections, where it seems that it's going to be close, a lot closer than people thought a month ago, at least if you listen to the press. And in this instance, what we saw in the federal election and we see in the United States especially, this idea of close elections is an opportunity for all sorts of gerrymandering and chicanery around elections. And so, you know, I would urge people to be very vigilant and watch the process very closely in BC, because that possibility exists. And a low vote count is going to help the incumbent government of Christy Clark. So, I would urge people to get out. If you can't vote for the NDP and you can't find your way to vote for the Greens, you know, there must, you know, find an independent, or, you know, or spoil your ballot or something. I don't know, but I mean, just staying home, I don't think is appropriate, you know.
My prediction for the election, I guess, would be an NDP majority with a few Greens elected. You sort of think the same thing?
Well, in my riding, I'm voting for a Green Party, you know, albeit what I just said about breaking the party system, but I'm going to vote for the leader of the Green Party, because there is no Green Party. I mean, there's nobody in, so there's no party, you know, mechanism right now. There will be in time, but I think I'll go with Sturck and my riding, and you know, hopefully we will see some Greens come in to, you know, at least keep the debate going. They realize they're not going to form a government or even an opposition, you know, anytime soon. Maybe the next election cycle things will change. Maybe our electoral system will be reformed one day. I don't know, but you know, try to break this ping pong game that we've seen in our political processes is I think is a real priority for me anyway.
In virtually every other Western democracy, including some that seem to work a lot better than ours does, they have proportional representation. So what would probably happen is the Greens would get 10% of the vote, let's say. They'd get 9 seats. The Conservatives would probably get 4 or 5 or 6. The NDP would probably get 40, and the Liberals the rest. So you'd probably see a coalition NDP Green government. That's what we would probably get if we had proportional representation, which I think would be a step in the right direction.
Well, if they can keep them honest. We saw what happened in Britain with the coalition government, where Nick Clegg, the coalition partner, is the invisible man, and none of his party's policies seem to crack the Conservative radar. So, I mean, there has to be diligence, you know, in that regard. But of course, you know, in BC and probably almost in every jurisdiction, you know, 80% of the populace is Green before they go into the ballot box, you know. And what we see now is somewhere around 15% are Green when they come out of the ballot box, right? So that 15%, you know, that's respectable support, and it also triggers mechanisms, funding mechanisms for parties as well. But again, the whole party process rears its ugly head, you know, and you know, this is something I really believe, at the very least, we have to have a bill of MLA rights where they can break party policy, you know, and speak their minds.
We should all be very tired of the party leadership, which means the leader and the backroom boys and girls, the party leadership completely controlling all of the MLAs that we elect. This is a big, big problem for us, and I mean, we should all focus on it, and we should make sure we change it, because if we do change something like that, we'll see big and positive changes happen right throughout our society, I think.
Well, you know, the former premier was famous for ruling via cabinet, you know, and so the MLAs, you know, they didn't do anything. They just did the Seal Act, you know, whenever asked to vote on whatever happened. I'm sure it would be the same on the other side of the floor, too, were they in power. We see it federally, too, and Mr. Harper is moving to concentrate ever more power in the hands of cabinet, you know, taking over various ministries. Just announced recently some of the environmental ministries and the NRC council. Forgive me, I've forgotten it now, but it's the major trade body in Canada developing trade policy and technology, you know, the direction we're going to take in the future. Now they're wrapping that up into tighter control by the PMO. So, I mean, do we want a cabinet to run the whole show, or do you know?
It's not even the cabinet, because Harper has total control of the cabinet. The premier or the prime minister completely controls the cabinet because they can kick anybody out tomorrow if they want to. So we essentially have an elected dictatorship, which is a disaster.
Yeah, well, that's often been the issue here in Canada. It's we don't have the checks and balances that the States has in their Republican system.
And what a mess they have now.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So, I mean, democracy can only function if the citizenry is actively involved and has power. In the States, the people are pushed out, and we are too. So, yeah, just fundamental democracy. You wanted to talk a little bit about international issues. So
sure. Well,
one was what happened in Bangladesh.
Yeah, the Bangladesh tragedy of almost 2 weeks ago now at time of taping, where this sweatshop factory collapsed. It was, I mean, this is the thing with democracy. When we talk about democracy, what do we mean? You know, we mean that we want to live by the rule of law. Now, it's not enough to have laws. Laws have to be obeyed. They have to be followed. This fellow who, Soel Rana, who built the Rana Plaza, which was this complex that collapsed, as we speak today, there's been more than 700 bodies recovered, with somewhere in the region of 400 to 500 still believed under the rubble. So we're looking at, this is a major disaster. I don't know how, you know, this is like, you know, 4 747 jetliners crashing. I mean, the numbers of people killed, and then the many more injured as well. You know, but this guy, he got his permit legally. It's a democratic country. He then broke the law, and he built this factory. He put 3 extra stories on top of it, but nobody said anything. You know, it was clearly against the law, but they let it slide. You know, I mean, there was a very interesting fellow whose name I'm afraid escapes me, but on CBC radio some weeks back, and he talked about the concept of sloth, and not just about being a lazy guy, but sloth in a society where people have given up their responsibilities. And this is, you can see this here in government, you can see it in the polity as well. I mean, the people should be out in the streets, and to be fair, lots of them do go out in the streets, and we've seen what happens, you know, the kind of reaction the state has to public demonstrations has sharpened considerably over these last 10 years. But we have to really hold these people's feet to the fire all the time, and we have to demand that the law be applied. And where it isn't, you know, we can even look here with this fiasco with the Blue Bridge, you know, and when we're trying to get information, the people that are supposed to be representing us and sharing and being transparent, they don't give us that information. They instead hide and obfuscate. They make us go through freedom of information requests to get the most basic information. It's an adversarial relationship, and it shouldn't be that way. It's not designed to be that way. How has it come to this, and how have we let it come to this, and why aren't we doing something to get Canada and Victoria and the Western democracies back on the track that they were designed for?
Which is, you know, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I mean, I certainly don't expect perfection, but I would really like to see, I mean, what the public wants come into play somewhere along the line. We have become almost completely irrelevant. They don't, I mean, the corporations and the politicians run this country for their own benefit. The public is completely out of the loop. Why should we be having to fight our governments over so many things? Why are they betraying us? Who do they work for?
Well, and it's dangerous.
What we have to, it's very dangerous. This is what we have to change. We Canadians have got to focus our attention onto the issues of democracy and media, because those two things really are one, and rebuild a nation where we have some control, not only some control, where we have the control.
Well, you know, it cost, at least so far, 700 people their lives in Bangladesh because the government didn't do what it was supposed to do. The corruption there is responsible directly for those deaths. Now, there's if anybody hasn't seen it, there's a photograph, a rather iconic one now, taken by a local journalist and labor activist, Taslima Akhtar, in Bangladesh, and it really brings home the horror of what happened there. Now, Canada has a direct connection to this because, of course, everyone knows now Joe Fresh, this brand of clothing, is made by Loblaw, the grocer giant from out east.
Owns Joe Fresh, right?
Joe Fresh is one of their spin-off companies, and you know, these guys, after the disaster, they were long-faced and they made vague promises, sort of ambivalent noises. Those noises have grown a little bit as daily the death toll is announced. You know, 500, 600, 700. Just released today, more than 700, and many more expected, you know. So this issue it's sort of a slow motion disaster in a PR sense for Joe Fresh, but there's still people arguing in our media, you know, it's, oh, well, you know, we don't want to pull out, you know, that would be more, that would hurt these workers because they've got it so good right now, you know, we don't want to pull out or anything. And there's something to be said for that too. But what's to be done? Something has to be done. You know, now I wrote an article about this and put it at my website, pacificfreepress.com, and I say simply, Joe Fresh must die. We have to make an example. These corporations, we know they're immortal, or at least they say they are in law. They go on and on. We have to shake that confidence. We as a people have to get together and manifest our disgust at a whole system. Now, it's not Joe Fresh's fault alone, obviously. This is a systemic problem, and it's not just in Bangladesh either. But we have to be able to focus our energies and bring these corporations into line. And one way to do that is to kill one of them. You know, I mean, kill it dead, and Joe Fresh must die, you know, and that will be the example to these other corporations that think, well, you know, if I can pay, you know, $30 a month to some, as the Pope even says, he refers to these people in this factory as slaves, right? You know, Jack, during the slavery debate in the States, there was people that say, no, we can't, if we stop slavery, who's going to take care of these slaves? What are these slaves going to do? I mean, they're being fed and everything by their masses, you know? And we're hearing the same argument now about Bangladesh. Oh, we can't pull out. I mean, what would happen to the poor slaves if we pulled out, you know? Well, maybe we can't, but maybe we can crucify one of the slave owners, one of the slave holders, one of the ones profiting from this slavery. And of course, Loblaws, just days after this disaster, had at their quarterly investors meetings, they were announcing record profits, you know?
Chris, I'm afraid we're almost out of time, believe it or not. That was very fast. There was one other topic you wanted to just touch on, and that was what's happening in Syria and Israel.
Well, I mean, that's huge, and it's going on right now as we speak. You know, Israel has taken it upon itself to fire rockets at various targets. 42 dead, I understand, from the attacks over the weekend.
This is an act of war, of course.
Yes, by definition it is, but the American government says, well, Israel has the right to defend itself against arms being sent to people they determined to be enemies that may or may not do something.
If that holds true, then it must mean that other countries can bomb the United States, well, because they're sending arms to all kinds of countries.
If that holds true, then Nuremberg means nothing. Yeah. You know, the Nuremberg trials after the Second War mean nothing.
The United States has got to be reined in. They're just out of control right now.
First Joe Fresh, then we'll deal with the Americans.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris Cook. And thank you very much for watching this week's Citizens Forum. See you next week. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.